coordinator of the Anti-Domestic Violence Council. I will ask the other colleagues at the table to introduce themselves to you.
Again, thank you so much, colleagues, for coming. My name is Zimbabwean, and I'm the chairperson of the Anti-Domestic Violence Council.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Agnes Mfukare. I'm a councillor with the Anti-Domestic Violence Council. Thank you.
Thank you. We're expecting more members of the council to join us as we go through our proceedings. So the order of the day, we're going to start by hearing a statement from the chairperson of the council. Then after her statement, we'll open the floor for questions from the media. We don't expect to spend more than 1 hour, 30 minutes in this process. So, yeah, thank you so much. Over to you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Again, colleagues, thank you so much, members of the Fourth Estate, for coming. We're really excited to see that as the Anti-Domestic Violence Council, we are not alone in the work that we are doing. We have very interested parties. I know that when we're walking in, there were colleagues that were saying, coming from the media, when is this problem going to end? You know, when is it going to end? And I think that is what brings us together. Without assuming that you know the Anti-Domestic Violence Council, I think a good point to start is to introduce the broad mandate of the council and then to make a statement. The Anti-Domestic Violence Council is a statutory body. As you can see from our banner, we are formed in terms of the Domestic Violence Act, Chapter 5, 16 of 2007. And our vision is of a Zimbabwean society free from domestic violence. And the media plays a critical role in efforts to end domestic violence. And the functions of the council are as follows, and I'll go through them briefly. To keep under constant review the problem of domestic violence in Zimbabwe. The other function is to take all steps necessary to disseminate information and increase public awareness on domestic violence issues. And we are also mandated to promote research on the issue of domestic violence. What are its causes? What are the drivers? What are the appropriate responses given the causes and the drivers? And we are also mandated to promote delivery of quality services necessary to end domestic violence and to support those that have been affected by domestic violence, as well as to monitor the delivery of those services. We are also to promote the establishment of safe houses for sheltering victims or survivors of domestic violence, depending on where they are on their journey after suffering domestic violence, and also to promote the provision of support services where the perpetrator who was provider is imprisoned. So in instances where a perpetrator has been imprisoned, we have a mandate to ensure the support of the family that remains behind after their incarceration. And also, then broadly, to do anything necessary to ensure the implementation of the Act. So part of why we're meeting today really is to make a statement around some of the incidences of domestic violence, so that we bring awareness, public awareness, but also to engage with yourselves on your experience of the issues and how you think as a society we can end domestic violence. And I think also it's important to give a little more context also around the statistics. What are we fussing about? What is happening? What are the incidences of domestic violence? Just to give you a snapshot that in 2016, 1,993 men reported cases of domestic violence perpetrated against them, against 17,673 women that reported in the same year. And we find that in 2017, 2,461 men or males reported incidences of domestic violence perpetrated against them, against 16,067 cases of women and girls who reported domestic violence. We are still compiling the total figures for 2018, and these are police reported figures. They exclude figures of other practitioners in the sector, and as you know, there are many. We just took the police figures. And for 2018, which is up to September, 2,183 men had reported cases of domestic violence against them, against 10,064 women. So we thought we'd give you this background as a council so that when we give our statement, it has a context. And I will deliver the statement of the council now. The Herald of 28 March 2019 carried a story entitled, "Man Kills Wife, Brother-in-Law." He shot his wife, Olivia Zenda, 42, and brother-in-law, Robert Zenda, 99, in front of their 3 children, his mother-in-law, a relative, and their housemaid, with a CZ pistol at around 7 a.m. That is what the article stated. And please do understand that we are very clear that we are speaking not just, we are citing an incident, but there are many similar cases that I think all of you can quote and have in fact reported on in the past. So we're saying, as the Anti-Domestic Violence Council, we note with great concern and condemn such disturbing incidences which emanate from poorly handled domestic disputes. And we call upon the responsible authorities to handle this case and all other similar cases with the seriousness that they deserve, to ensure that justice prevails for all. We mourn with family and friends of Olivia and Robert Zenda, standing for the thousands that I narrated, who callously lost their lives. And I'm not suggesting that all figures are people that lost their lives, but some of them did. So ending domestic violence will require, in our view, a coordinated and concerted community response in which we all play our part. It is understandable to be shocked when domestic violence occurs, but we must also understand the root causes of domestic violence. For us, it is tragic when cold-blooded murders occur, when maiming, when disempowerment happens. But we must know that we can prevent domestic violence from ever taking one more of our sisters, of our brothers, of our family members, of our neighbors and co-workers again. We have an obligation and a responsibility as Zimbabweans to ensure that doesn't happen. And together, we can prevent another child having to experience the abuse, death of a parent, and the consequent orphanhood. The Anti-Domestic Violence Council is therefore calling upon communities to report suspected cases of domestic violence. And by the way, the Domestic Violence Act enables us to do third-party reporting. So it's no longer the affected person reporting, but those that observe the violence can report. So we all have an obligation to report. And victims of domestic violence to report such cases and never to remain in violent relationships. It is better to walk away from a violent relationship than to lose your life in it. And we're also calling on policymakers to commit themselves and play their part in ending domestic violence. And we're calling for stiffer penalties to be imposed on perpetrators of domestic violence. And we're calling on families to unequivocally condemn domestic violence and challenge prevailing beliefs, norms, and values that feed and normalize and perpetuate domestic violence. We are calling on communities to develop a culture of zero tolerance to domestic violence, regardless of its scope. We are calling on community leaders to speak openly against domestic violence and create community-based responses, and also protection systems. We are also calling on service providers to promptly provide quality services to victims of sexual violence and other offenses and ensure timely access to justice. Finally, colleagues, we reiterate the fact that domestic violence happens in every community and happens across economic, social, ethnic, racial, educational backgrounds. Anyone can be a victim of domestic violence. Domestic violence also happens in upmarket, quiet, and so-called safe neighborhoods. In fact, abuse thrives the most in secrecy. And also the perceptions in public opinion that it is a personal or family matter does not help. So most importantly, we must remember that according to section 52 of our constitution, the Zimbabwe Constitution of 2013, every Zimbabwean has a right to personal security and bodily integrity. That freedom from abuse or fear is a right to every victim and child who witnesses or experiences domestic violence. This is why, as caring community members, we must do more. It is our responsibility to learn more about this scourge so that we can help more. We are all urged to speak out and to take actions to end domestic violence in Zimbabwe. And so we are making finally a call to Zimbabweans and asking this question as the anti-domestic violence. Are you experiencing domestic violence yourself? Do you want to know if a relationship is abusive, or do you suspect abuse? Do you know someone experiencing domestic violence? We are asking these questions because they are often not asked, and so this is how domestic violence is perpetuated. So we're saying it is important to take domestic violence seriously, get information, and share resources. Help is available in Zimbabwe, in every province, district, and some wards for every victim through a network of programs dedicated to serving domestic violence victims and their families. Similarly, as you know, the Ministry of Women Affairs, Community Small, Medium Enterprise Development is present in every province, in every district, and in many instances, in many wards. And they do have information as the home of the agency for coordinating and advancing gender equality. They have the information and the resources that can be shared so that when you are in need of help, or you know someone who is in need of help, they can point you to the service providers that are in their area. So let's not let our communities suffer in silence or of ignorance. There are resources that are available. Let's encourage communities to step out to report. We also know that the Zimbabwe Republic Police has a specialized victim-friendly unit at every police station that is competent and capable of handling domestic violence cases. So our clarion call is, let us seek help for ourselves and for others that are affected by domestic violence. And we're saying it is never, never too late to seek help. I close with that statement and open the floor for discussions, for questions, for comments. And please do understand that the sole purpose is so that we can work together to end domestic violence in Zimbabwe. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We now open the floor to questions. May we please make our questions very short and precise. Yes, your name and your question.
My name is Bruno Thomas, Spectrum Magazine.
Okay.
And you gave us statistics you got from the police.
Yes.
But we would have wanted you to give us also how the courts have actually dealt with those cases. And in 2018, I think it's now 4 months into a new year, and you're saying it's still compiling, but police, they already have the statistics. And suppose a case has been dealt with in the courts and you are not satisfied, what do you do as the council?
I think let's take 2 or 3 questions, then we can respond.
Okay, can we have another question? Not at the moment, so maybe you could respond. I don't see a hand.
You're rubbing your cheek.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just a follow-up on the question of statistics. I noticed that the number seems to be growing up. And as a council, what measures are you taking in terms of trying to, perhaps get this to Parliament, to all platforms, so that the figures start growing?
I think we can go. I can start with the last question. I think it's true that the statistics are going up, but I think as a council we're saying even one statistic is one too many. And one of the things that we are doing as we speak as a council is that we have entered into an understanding together with our partner SAT and UNFPA to look at police records for the past 3 years, so that we do an in-depth analysis of what cases are being reported, who is reporting, how and where are they reporting from. And we're hoping that that information, that analysis will help us to understand what is driving domestic violence in Zimbabwe, and therefore our response is appropriate. Perhaps just to make this clarification that as an anti-domestic violence council, we have more a coordination and oversight role. We do not do direct implementation. We have partners that we work with within government, within civil society organizations, and even UN agencies who have a mandate to respond directly to domestic violence. But our role is to ensure that the services are provided, that they are quality services, that there's support for both survivors and rehabilitation for perpetrators, and also to ensure that there is knowledge out there by the public that domestic violence is wrong. So we are limited in that way, in that we don't do direct programming, but these kinds of conversations for us are extremely important, because then we get to appreciate the work that is going on, the perspectives of media houses and what we should do. And then to the colleague from Spectrum Magazine, we are hoping that as part of the research mandate that we have as a council, that we can look at that. In fact, a few months back, some of us made a visit to the domestic violence court at the civil court on 4th. And it was dismaying just to see the overwhelming numbers of cases that are going there, the range of cases that are going there. And you can see that the officers, you wonder if they've even time to breathe. It's just an intractable situation. So you are really right that it's important for us to have a hands-on on the pulse of how are the courts handling these cases. In cases where I'm not happy with the resolution of what's my recourse, we have a responsibility as a council indeed to look into that. Well, in terms of statistics, and I'm hoping that Maggie can say a little more, that we are trying to fine-tune, I think, our link with the police so that we get timely access to information. And I think that is not just the police, because like we rightly say, this is probably a tip of the iceberg in terms of the statistics, because they are not coming from direct service providers, as it were. These are reported cases. So there are other cases that are reported through other organizations that don't make it to the police statistics. So indeed, there's still a lot of work to be done. So I hope that some of the things that will come out of here is how do we better oil this machine so that it works better. Otherwise, there's no end in sight for domestic violence. So I think these questions are well taken, and I think they show some of the work that still needs to be done by the council.
Okay, I would like to acknowledge the presence of UNFPA. They're with us in the room. They've been supporting the work of the council technically and financially. I would also like to acknowledge the presence of Busasa. I'm sure we all know the great work that they're doing in assisting survivors of domestic violence. I'll take more questions. I saw your hand up, sir.
Yes. All right. My name is Peter Tengeno. I'm coming from the Zimbabwean.
Yes.
Okay. I want to know that is this council for women? Are men well represented? And if they are, can you, of those cases that you mentioned, can you tell me maybe statistics of women that have been convicted? Because we know that women are really also participating in domestic violence. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Then you.
Okay. Recently there was some media reports of the Vice President Kembomad being implicated in cases of domestic violence. What's your view as the council?
Okay.
I'm Abel Zobo from SlyMedia TV. My question is, after all the efforts that are being done to lessen or reduce the case of domestic violence, the rise in number of cases that have been rising over the years, is it exactly a rise in the number of domestic cases or domestic violence cases, or is it a rise in the reportage? So if it is a rise in numbers of domestic violence cases, where are we failing, maybe in our response to domestic violence?
You have a question? Okay, we can take one more then respond. Yeah.
Okay, my name is Kudzai Nawashi. My question is there any support for victims, particularly in cases where the perpetrators are breadwinners?
Thank you very much again for those insightful questions. Are men represented on the council? Yes, they are. If you're talking about the actual council, we have 3 men that sit with us. They couldn't be here, but it would have been good to have them here, because I think also some of the 4 men. Yes. Yes. I beg your pardon. Yeah. There are 4 men that sit with us out of a 12-member team. We could do more, but I think as a council we are very clear that gender refers to both women and men. But I think, in all honesty, as you heard from the statistics, women are disproportionately affected by domestic violence. And so sometimes the concerns come from that. And I think it's important to acknowledge that, otherwise our responses become inappropriate. But I think there are efforts too, and there's an understanding that in order to end domestic violence, it's important to engage men as perpetrators and also as survivors. So I think the council has that understanding. But I think it's the broader question of how do we define that so that we don't have another layer of patriarchy, of male preference in the name of male inclusion and male participation. And I think we should keep these discussions going because they are real. So that we then shift all resources and focus to men, because we're saying, where are the men? And I'm hoping that as media you can bring up these issues very clearly, because that's where we get stuck, in the equality discourse, we understand that it's men and women together, but I think statistics show us that there is disproportionate effect of both GBV and the subsect domestic violence on women than on men. Is that the case? I hope so. I hope we all acknowledge that. And then the other question is, do we have statistics on convicted women? I think I go back to the same issue that we are hoping that our next layer of research and understanding is to bring out in the studies, because we have a mandate also to generate information and lived realities around that. And I'm sure that some of our partners that are working specifically with women survivors, women offenders, will be able to have that. We're not able to give those statistics, but we understand that they are very important for efforts towards ending domestic violence in Zimbabwe. Then, relating to the question on the Vice President, we as a council have not received official information on that incident. We read it, you know, like many of you might have online. But I think the principle of Zimbabwe as a nation, and I think the council as a statutory body, is that domestic violence is wrong. But we cannot go beyond that because we don't have sufficient detail to discuss beyond what I've said, and I hope that is adequate. So the principles of the council have not shifted. We still are going for a Zimbabwe society free from domestic violence, and that's it. Can I just, it's a follow-up question. Can I answer the last question and then we can have follow-up questions? The issue of the rise in domestic violence cases, and I think cases, some of our partners that are here, Msasa Project and yeah, please do feel free to respond. I don't think we have researched positions, certainly that we have, that tell us, you know, whether the reporting is a result of increased awareness or increasing cases of and either is possible. But in our view, in order to end that, it is a good thing. I think increasing numbers of reporting tell us that we are doing something right. And again, just as a by the way, I remember that as a council, we visited some rural community, and some of us just went out, you know, talking to women, and were saying that as women, what ails you the most? Do you know, I personally spoke to 10 women, and all of them on their list was, so for me, that told me two things: that they're aware of their rights, but I think what then is needed is how do we make more services available, so that if I feel that my rights are being abused, I'm being violated, I can have recourse. I think that's the next frontier of challenge. But as it is, we know that we do not have sufficient services that are provided in rural communities that will make it easy to respond. And that's why the presence of the National Machinery for Women's Advancement at the lowest level is so very important, and it's a facility that we should use to report cases of domestic violence. And I would defer also to my colleagues who are, you know, direct practitioners, if we as a council have left some issues unanswered. Colleagues?
Thank you. I think, like what you've just mentioned, yes, we are having an increase in the number of cases that are being reported. If I was to compare...
Sorry.
Okay.
From Sasa?
From Sasa, yes. Okay, thank you. Just to respond, to add on to what she said, I wanted to say that yes, we are actually getting more numbers in terms of women and girls who are coming to report. And if we were to compare 2013 and 2018, in 2013 we would get cases close to 13,000, but as of 2018 we got cases close to 26,000, which is a double. Yes, it's also a sign that the work that partners are doing in the field is giving us results, because I think the effort has also been to raise awareness on the rights of women and girls and the services that are also available for them in the event that they've undergone domestic violence. And it's also a sign that women are also aware of the services that are available. But at the same time, we also need to acknowledge, like what she has also mentioned, that the services at the moment are not adequate to cater for every woman and girl. And all these services, these are some of the issues that we are also fighting for, to ensure that women and girls have access to readily available services in the event that they've undergone some form of violence.
Yes, the follow-up question, Chair.
Okay, there was a question on support for.
Oh, you wanted to, sorry. You wanted to add to.
No,
it's a question.
On support for victims when perpetrators have been incarcerated. The Ministry of Women Affairs has various packages where they would train, specifically identify such women, train them in different skills, offer them loans through the Women's Development Fund, also refer to the Women's Microfinance Bank, so that it's not just giving handouts, but giving them skills to be able to sustain themselves as they take care of their families in the absence of the breadwinner. Okay.
Yeah, I think to add to that, thank you very much, Mike, for reminding us of that question. And I know that a lot of the service providers, certainly I'm intimately knowledgeable about the work that they do, is that they are taking a holistic approach to sheltering services, that I may be running away from harm, but I need to go back to the community. So you find that in instances where women come in and they do not have appropriate skills, it's amazing the skilling efforts that go on, so that when she goes back to the community, never mind what has happened to the perpetrator, she is able to fend for herself. And those integrated processes of service provision more and more are being defined and really growing in leaps and bounds, just to take care of, you know, the question that you asked, that then what happens, because we know that a lot of the cases also are dropped because women say, what are we going to eat if we send him to prison? And so they withdraw cases based on that. So based on that consciousness, and of course the right to economic empowerment of women and girls, you find that a lot of the service providers dealing with domestic violence more and more are coming up with integrated services where they economically empower, offer psychosocial support for survivors. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Yeah, in terms of the issues of empowering women that are affected with domestic violence, how best are you doing the issue in terms of ward or district level? If, for instance, one is affected today, who is the person that she might go to see or to ask for help? And also in terms of their issues of high profiles, whether people are believed to be of high profiles, how best are you dealing with such issues?
Okay, can we have another question? So how are we with time? 10 minutes. 10 minutes, okay. 1, 2, any new hands? Okay, then I think you'll be the last person to offer a question, unless we have any burning issues after this round. Okay, who was one? Okay.
The Times is a TL. In terms of statistics, do you have any specific statistics on which provinces were most affected? And if so, perhaps are there any reasons why those particular provinces have the highest number of GBV cases?
Let me take a question on related to economic empowerment. What we do in conjunction with the ministry, like what she has already indicated, there are projects that are being done at district level. So it means if a woman has been identified and she requires those particular projects, she can also be incorporated within a particular district where she is relocated to. But what we are also doing is we are also offering economic empowerment programs where you are currently housed. If you are in a safe house, for example in Bikita or wherever you are, we are also empowering you there so that by the time you leave, you have somewhere to start from. In previous months, we also had a facility where we were doing microfinance projects, which means we are also provided with capital to start your project, which you deem is feasible for you. and you are given time so that you can also do that, so that you can also support yourself now that you are the sole breadwinner. So these are some of the projects that we've been doing to make sure that women also do not get into the cycle of poverty after the husband has been incarcerated.
I think there was a question on how do we deal with high-profile cases?
Okay. I think she has responded very well. From SASA, we condemn violence in the strongest sense, and we believe that violence is violence, regardless of who has done it, and we need justice to take its course. There is no justification for killing a woman. There is no justification for killing a girl. There is no justification for physically disabling a woman or a girl. And we want and we believe that justice has to take its course in all cases that are reported, regardless of who you are or what you are.
Then in terms of statistics where it's most prevalent, Harare has always proved to have most of the reported cases. It could be an issue of awareness, maybe they are more aware, or they have many places of where to take their cases to. We'll still have to make that analysis and see why is it Harare has most of the cases. And when we look at the table as well, Matabele and South is the least reported cases of domestic violence. We are still to find out and establish why this is as it is. It's part of the work that we are carrying out currently. Yes.
I'm seeing that there's a lot of work, a lot of practicality in terms of what happens after somebody has been violated. But I'm not seeing a lot of work in terms before and maybe perhaps during. Now, just out of interest, maybe if some of your service providers can answer the question whether or not we have services whereby you can answer a call of a man or a woman who is in distress at the scene of domestic violence. Perhaps maybe send in a counselor or a support worker or the police to come to an interview.
Thank you so much. That's the core business of MSASA. What MSASA does is we respond to distress calls on gender-based violence. It might be anywhere in Zimbabwe, we respond to those. So you might find that in a particular district, we might not have a counselor there and then, but we have a network of victim-friendly unit officers in all the districts, whom we then call for assistance so that they attend to those cases. What we've also done is we've also established what we call a GBV platform. So anyone, anywhere, anytime, you can get assistance if you are undergoing that kind of distress at any time. So when you come through, so you can get assisted over the telephone, you can also get assisted physically. So somebody can even come through. When they come through, they are provided with the services that are required depending on the nature of the case. And because we are also part of the referral system in terms of the gender-based violence system in Zimbabwe, we then refer you for the critical services that you also require. So somebody can come through, they've been raped. We give you the counseling. We also then immediately refer you to a clinical facility so that you acquire the necessary services before your case then goes to the police for the docket to be opened and access to justice. So these are the services that we provide 24/7, 7 days a week, 52 days a month, 52 weeks in a month.
Thank you. Then the last question.
Well, that happens about the province again, but since
okay.
you know,
Okay.
cases where development cases of women violence against women. In cases my guru abuse and my abuse and my guru.
And I'm hoping that Msasa can also talk. Domestic violence defines the context of the violence, in relation to gender-based violence. So it's people known to you or in the same physical space. So whatever is defined as violence, we treat it as such. But I think the bigger issue behind your question is, to what extent are we talking to each other as Zimbabweans to say that it's not okay for sisters-in-law to be on the case of the Amurora, or for Wamwene Kanakti Murora on the case of... I think that's your bigger question. And I think as a nation, we need to unpack these issues because they are happening. And I mean, I will agree with anyone. We don't hear enough about them, but they are real. They are tearing lives apart, and they are wrong. In terms of the Domestic Violence Act, they are wrong, they are happening. But I think we need, again, as the fourth estate, you are the people that highlight these issues, bring them out, call us to a discussion about these issues as a nation, because they are highlighting them. They are happening, they are wrong, and they are part of domestic violence and should end. I think that would be my broad stroke response to that. I've personally thought a lot around that, how there's a lot of pain. You talk to young brides, older women, how they are abused, and it's not just one generation. It's across generations of abuse of women on, but I think we need more discussion. We need to bring out these issues so that there's awareness that they are wrong and they should not be taken lightly. That would be, I think, the response to that. I don't know, Sasa, if you have anything more to add. Yeah.
I think this now brings us to the end of this media briefing, and